Can you smell that? Charcoal, caramelized sugar, the tang of vinegar, and that low and slow meat that falls apart at a mere glance. Most of us, when we hear the word barbecue, immediately picture the same thing. The American flag, flannel shirts, Texas, massive black pits, and tough guys competing for the title of Rib King. We've grown used to thinking that BBQ is as American an invention as the iPhone, Hollywood, or the moon landing. But what if I told you that Texas was actually the last one to arrive at this party? That the true authors of this technology never spoke a word of English? And that for every bite of succulent pork we eat today, a price was paid in the currency of great discoveries, pirate raids, and even human lives? Today, we untangle this knot. We'll find out why Americans are ready to fight over a sauce recipe, how a word from the language of a vanished tribe conquered the planet, and who actually taught the world how to cook meat slow. Spoiler, the Spanish thought it was a torture device. Turns out it was a ticket to gastronomic paradise. Hi there. Today, we're not just talking about food. This is an investigation into the hottest theft in culinary history. Have you ever wondered why we love smoky meat so much? Why the scent of a campfire triggers some primal instinct of happiness? It's not an accident. It's our genetic memory. But before we dive into the jungles of the Caribbean, let's get our terms straight. Because here lies the first mistake. Most people confuse grilling with barbecue. Grilling, high heat, 200 degrees C plus, 400 degrees plus, fast searing, 10-20 min, direct flame, steaks, sausages, shashlik. Barbecue, low and slow, low heat, 100-120 degrees, 225-250 degrees, long duration, 6 to 14 hours, indirect heat, and, crucially, smoke. Everyone knew how to cook meat fast, but cooking it for hours, turning the toughest cuts into a tender delicacy, that is an art with a very specific registration address. Let's head into the past, to a time when fire wasn't entertainment, it was survival. Let's rewind time for a moment. About 1.5 million years, Homo erectus, our distant ancestor, makes the greatest discovery in history, fire. But why does this matter for a BBQ talk? Because according to Richard Wrangham's cooking hypothesis, it was cooking that made us human. Cooked food is easier to digest. We no longer had to spend 6 hours a day chewing raw meat like chimpanzees do. Our teeth shrank, and that saved energy went straight to developing our brains. But ancient humans faced a problem. How do you preserve meat? No fridges, barely any salt, and that's where smoke comes in. Smoke is a natural antiseptic. It creates a barrier on the meat's surface that prevents bacteria from multiplying. 1492. Christopher Columbus reaches the shores of the New World. He's looking for gold, spices, and a path to India. Instead, he finds the people we now call the Taíno. The Spanish were shocked by many things, but one looked particularly strange. They saw the indigenous people building structures out of fresh, green wood. It was a grid on 4 legs with a small fire smoldering underneath. On this grid lay fish, lizards, and the meat of wild hogs. In the Taíno language, this structure was called barbacoa. Fun fact, the Spanish initially thought it was a bed, because the Taíno also used these raised platforms to sleep above the ground, away from snakes and insects. But when they tasted what came off that grid, their world flipped. Instead of meat that was charred on the outside and raw in the middle, which was how they usually cooked on spits in Europe, they got something incredibly juicy and aromatic. The green wood didn't burn, it created lots of smoke and kept the meat at a safe distance from the flames. The Spanish borrowed the word. In 1518, the term barbacoa officially appeared in Spanish dictionaries. But they didn't just bring back a word, they brought something to the Caribbean, pigs. Before Columbus, there were no pigs, cows, or chickens in the Americas. The Spanish released domestic hogs onto the islands. They went feral, multiplied, and became the perfect fuel for the evolution of BBQ. Fatty pork is the ideal meat for long, slow rendering. Now we move north, to colonial America, Virginia, and North Carolina. This is where the history of BBQ takes its most vital turn. Movies often show white colonists celebrating around a bonfire, but the truth is they rarely stood by the fire themselves. Barbecue was exhausting, heavy, and very dirty work that lasted all night. Who did that work? Enslaved people from Africa. This is a critical point that is often overlooked. Enslaved Africans brought their own culinary knowledge. They already knew how to work with spices, how to marinate meat in vinegar to keep it from spoiling in the heat, and how to use pit smoking. The white masters took the high-on-the-hog cuts, loin, ham. The enslaved were left with the trash, ribs, trotters, hog heads, tails. This meat couldn't just be fried in a pan, it was as tough as a boot sole. And here, a culinary explosion occurred. By combining the Taíno, barbacoa, European marinades, and African smoking techniques, these people created a miracle. They learned to cook third-rate cuts so well they became better than any tenderloin. They invented pulled pork. They made ribs an icon. They developed the low and slow method not because they wanted a hobby, but because it was the only way to make their food edible. In doing so, they built the foundation of American cuisine. When you visit the U.S. today, you're walking into a minefield, because BBQ in different states represents different religions. If you tell a Texan you like South Carolina sauce, they'll look at you like a heretic. North Carolina, the oldest style, only pork and only a vinegar and pepper sauce, no tomato allowed. This is the legacy of British colonists who preserved meat in vinegar. South Carolina, famous for Carolina gold. Why mustard? Because in the 18th century, many German immigrants settled here. They brought mustard, mixed it with local traditions, and boom, a unique style was born. Kansas City. This is what we know as BBQ sauce in supermarkets. Thick, sweet, tomato-based with molasses. It's the youngest style. Texas. Here, beef is king. Brisket. Salt, pepper, smoke. No sauce should hide the flavor of the meat. See the intrigue? Each of these styles is a chapter in the history of human migration. BBQ isn't a recipe, it's a map of the world on your plate. Now for the most interesting part. Let's go back to the question, who was first? Americans love to say they invented BBQ, but let's look at the facts. The first written record of the word barbecue in English appeared in 1661. It was written by Edmund Hickeringel in his work about Jamaica. Not Virginia, not Massachusetts, the Caribbean. Furthermore, in the 1800s, BBQ in the U.S. was a political weapon. Imagine this, the election of 1824. How do you gather 10,000 people in one place without social media or TV? The answer, free meat. American politicians, including Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln, used BBQ as a primary campaign tool. A candidate would buy 50 bulls, 100 pigs, dig a massive pit, hire the best black pitmasters, and feed the whole town. The phrase, "I was at a barbecue" in the 19th century often meant, I was at a political rally. People endured boring speeches just for that smell of smoke. George Washington wrote in his diary in 1769, went to Alexandria to a purge and a barbecue and stayed all night. Even the first president knew how to party. But here's the irony. While white politicians were gathering votes and plantation owners were getting rich, the actual mastery remained in the hands of people who weren't even considered citizens. Only after the Civil War and the abolition of slavery did black entrepreneurs begin opening the first commercial BBQ joints. They turned poor man's food into a massive industry. The legendary early spots in Memphis and Chicago were opened by the children of former slaves, cooking exactly how their parents had taught them. So, when Texas and Carolina argue over who's better, they're arguing over details. The real story is the Taíno who gave the name, the Spanish who gave the pigs, and the Africans who gave this dish its soul. Look at this pink ring. That's a chemical reaction between nitrogen dioxide in the smoke and myoglobin in the meat. That is the hallmark of real BBQ. Today, BBQ is a universal language. Japan has its style, Korea has theirs, Argentina has asado, and Ukraine has shashlik, which has different roots but the same magic of fire. What did we learn today? Barbecue is not an American word. It's the heritage of the Taíno people. It wouldn't exist without the pigs brought by colonizers. The most significant technological contribution was made by enslaved Africans in the American South. And yes, BBQ once decided the fate of presidential elections. This tastes like history, a history of struggle, adaptation, and incredible ingenuity. Next time you smell smoke in your neighborhood or at a restaurant, remember the Taíno. Remember the pitmasters of the past. We are eating their legacy. I hope your next picnic won't just be lunch, but a journey through time. And next week, oh, it gets even better. I'll tell you about a dish that almost started a war between 3 countries. You eat it almost every morning and think it's French, but the French had nothing to do with it. Hint, it's flaky and smells like butter. Subscribe so you don't miss that detective story. Hit the like button if you made it this far and now want ribs as badly as I do.